everybody, I'm Vicki Abelson. My family name used to be Able Daughter, but a couple of guys at Ellis Island thought we seemed funnier. Okay, all right, that's funny because Adam Carolla just said that women aren't funny. Yeah. And it's something I actually want to, yeah. Marshall Seller wrote that on my Twitter, and I thought it was hysterical. I guess 3 days it's too late. He said women aren't funny. We're going to talk to Carl about that in a little bit, because he did 2 of the funniest women in the history of television, right? So he has to think women are funny, I'm thinking. Okay, let's see. Welcome to Women Who Write. For those of you who are new, what we do is we go around the room and everybody's going to do their Laura Petrie imitation, and we're going to start with... Okay. And people said to me, why is it called Women Who Write? You're having Carl Reiner. He's not a woman. Well, you know what? If you read the disclaimer underneath it, it says, we're not all women and we don't all write. And he said, well, that's basically everybody. And I said, you know what? You're right. Because why do we want to limit ourselves? Because if we can get Carl Reiner, are we going to say no? No, we are not going to say no. Because Nancy Reagan was wrong. It's not just say no. It's just say yes. No, not like that. But no, so I have to behave myself today because I do. So make me behave myself. Carl is here. Oh, but it is about saying yes because I don't like change. I like things to stay as they are. And I'm very uncomfortable with change. And we've never done a one-person show before. But if there is one person to do it with, who? That one. This is a really, really special day. And not just because I was able to zip my pants without lying down. That is not the only reason it is a special day. And it's really emotional for me because my father is another Bronx-born Romanian-Austrian Jewish man. And he was an entertainer in the Catskills and the Borscht Belt. And my father passed away last year, and what this would mean to him, that you are in my home, this is the biggest success I will ever have. The biggest. Yes, it is. Okay. Let's see, where am I? Okay, so, this all happened because of Phil Rosenthal. So I have to thank Phil and Monica Rosenthal. They had me to their home. I met Carl. And what was the most amazing thing about that experience was that, there was a bunch of people around. And I went up to Carl to introduce myself and to tell him what a fan I was. And we started chatting. And I told him that I had just heard this story about when he was on Johnny Carson. And Johnny had asked him who the funniest person he knew was. And he proceeded to tell this story about his son's friend, 15-year-old, I think, at the time, Albert Brooks. Yes, Albert Brooks. And Carl then proceeded to tell me the story in incredible detail, so much as to act it out and have me participate. And for those 10 minutes, his eyes did not leave mine for one moment. For those 10 minutes, I was the most important person in Carl's world. And when Carl hears the name Vicki this week, he thinks of me. And I cannot tell you what that means to me. This is, all right, okay. Now let's get back to Carl. Depending on who you talk to, Carl Reiner is best known as a co-star on the legendary television program Your Show of Shows, or as the creator and co-star of The Dick Van Dyke Show, or as the interviewer of The 2,000-Year-Old Man, or as a director of feature films including The Jerk, All of Me, Oh God, Where's Papa? Or as the father, actor, writer, director, producer, as the father of actor, writer, director, producer Rob Reiner, and I thought of him this morning because I did a sock and a shoe and a sock and a shoe, and I always think of him. And husband of jazz vocalist Estelle Reiner, or as the recipient of 12 Emmy Awards.
Oh my God. Wow.
Carl up. He was born in the Bronx. At Evander Childs, I'm a Bronx girl. At Evander Childs High School, Carl's interest was baseball. But at age 16, he took a job as a machinist helper in the millinery trade. He simultaneously enrolled in drama school, thank God, and landed a part as a second tenor in an updated version of The Merry Widow. Carl subsequently served in World War II, first training as a radio operator in the Air Force, followed by an assignment to Georgetown University to study French in order to become an interpreter, then as a teletype operator in the Signal Corps, and later as a comedian and actor in Maurice Evans' Special Services Entertainment Unit. He toured the Pacific for 18 months in GI reviews. Upon his honorable discharge in 1946, he won the leading role in the national company of Call Me Mister. And after 3 more years in various Broadway musicals, he joined Sid Caesar and Imogene Coca in a show of shows.
Wow.
In 1958, his first novel, Enter Laughing, was published. How many of us have read Enter Laughing?
Yeah.
An autobiographical work, the book chronicled Carl's frustration as a young machinist helper in the millinery trade and his eventual entry into show business. Sounds like somebody writes what they know. The book subsequently became the basis for a Broadway play of the same name. In 1961, Mr. Reiner conceived The Dick Van Dyke Show, which would become one of the most famous and best-loved sitcoms in television history. And I might add, set the tone for every sitcom that followed it. The first one to really talk about the workplace, the home place, and how they meshed. Of course, audiences have never forgotten his co-starring role as the toupee-wearing producer, Alan Brady. That same year, he wrote the feature film, The Thrill of It All, with Doris Day and James Garner. I love that movie. Oh God, I'm making noise with my thing. Mr. Reiner's other feature film credits as a director include the comic, Where's Papa? Oh God, The Jerk, Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid, which I had the pleasure of watching with him recently, The Man with Two Brains, All of Me, Summer Rental, The One and Only, Summer School, Burt Rigby, You're a Fool, which Reiner also wrote, Sibling Rivalry, Fatal Instinct, That Old Feeling. Mr. Reiner and Mel Brooks released a CD and book with new material in October 1997 called The 2,000-Year-Old Man in the Year 2000. Carl's big screen credits include a starring role in The Russians Are Coming, The Russians Are Coming, and roles in It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, The Gazebo, Generation, Dead Men Don't Wear Plaid, The End, The Slums of Beverly Hills. His most recent acting role was of Saul in the remake of Ocean's 11, Ocean's 12, and Ocean's 13. On TV, Mr. Reiner appeared on Beggars and Choosers, Family Law, The Bernie Mac Show, Crossing Jordan, The Bonnie Hunt Show, and Boston Legal. He is the voice of one of the characters in the new DreamWorks animated television show, Father of the Bride. TV Land produced and broadcast an animated half-hour pilot of Mr. Reiner's famous character, Alan Brady. And he has a recurring role in the animated The Cleveland Show. Mr. Reiner's books include the before-mentioned Enter Laughing, All Kinds of Love, Continue Laughing, How Paul Robeson Saved My Life, My Anecdotal Life, Just Desserts, and the children's books, Tell Me a Silly Story, Tell Me a Scary Story, and Tell Me Another Scary Story. Carl was inducted into the Television Academy Hall of Fame in 1999, and he received the Kennedy Center Mark Twain Prize in Comedy in 2001. Married for 64 years to the love of his life, his beloved Estelle, and I'd like to have what you guys were having. And no matter how many times anyone ever says that line or whoever says it, it will never be what Estelle did that day. We will never, ever forget it. They are also the parents of 2 other children, Annie Reiner, a poet, painter, playwright, psychoanalyst, that's an interesting combination, and Lucas Reiner, a painter, screenwriter, director. They are the proud grandparents of 5 grandchildren, and Carl calls his children terribly civilized, wonderful human beings. I call Carl a treasure. Ladies, please welcome Carl Reiner.
Will you sit down, please? Sit down.
I think I'm pleased to be here. I only say that because if it doesn't work out, I will not have been pleased. But I do have something for you. I didn't know which of the stories to either read or talk about, and my father, who I write about a lot in this book, my father is I think the reason I am who I am, in the sense that he was an inventor. I don't invent with my hands, but my mind does what his hands and mine did. He was an inventor who invented a lot of things that got patented, like the self-winding wristwatch and the battery clock. He invented the battery clock and many, many other things. But he sat at a bench overlooking a schoolyard where children played. And he was there all my life. He worked at home all my life. And this is a story that I wrote called The 35-Year-Old Filling. I could read it to you, but it's so easy to tell. My father was a Stoic. The loudest complaint I've ever heard was, I heard that twice while I was sitting there at 13. 13 years, I hear him go, and I look up and he says, look at that. And I said, what? And he has something in his finger. And I said, what is that? He says, that's a filling that fell out of this tooth. It's been in that tooth for 35 years. Aww. I said, Pa, how do you know how long a filling has been in your tooth? He said, I put this one in myself. And I did just what you did. I said, what? I said, and he told me the story. He says, well, I was in Vienna. By the way, give you a background. My father came from a place called Czernowitz. At 14, he was a master watchmaker. He came to Vienna and plied his craft at 14. When he was 18 years old, he had two bad teeth that were hurting him. He went to a dentist. Dentist drilled the tooth and filled it, and he said it was the most excruciating moment in his life. He never felt such pain. He said he ran out before he touched the second tooth. He paid the man and ran away. And what he did, he knew he had another bad tooth that had to be filled. So he went to the library and read about dentistry. He read about how to make a facet. He read about how to make an amalgam with mercury and silver to make a filling. And he had a drill. He was a watchmaker. He had little drills. He says, I drilled my tooth, and he says, and if it hurt, I would stop. He says, that guy wouldn't stop. I would stop. He says, and it took me a little longer than it would. But he said, I finally filled my tooth, and I filled the tooth, and it lasted for 35 years. Wow. And he actually said, I wish it had been 50. He was 35. Anyway, somebody mentioned Lucas Reiner. It's easy to tell. You don't mind if I tell stories. My wife and I had a wonderful, wonderful time in the south of France. We had bought a little house in a place called Castelrace. For a long time, none of the children wanted to go there. They'd rather play with their friends in the summer. And Stella and I had a wonderful 2 months there. This time, Lucas was 16, and he came with his friend, Kevin. Lucas is 16, and we're traveling along the coast, and we see the beach at Saint-Tropez. And I said, well, let's go see that beach. It was a nude beach, we'd heard about it. So we get out of the car, we walk on the beach, and as we're walking, two of the most beautiful women with the most beautifully gifted women. They were gifted, magnificent bosoms. They're coming at us, and my wife and I looked at the two boys. There's not a reaction. There's no reaction at all. And my wife and I says, look, we'll sit down and sit in the sand for a while. It takes the sun. You guys go for a walk. And that's what they did. They went for a walk. About a half hour later, an hour later, they came back. No reaction. How did you do? Fine. Everything's fine. We get in the car, and it's 1 hour ride back from Saint-Tropez to Castelrace. And Lucas and Kevin in the back seat, silent, quiet. I'm trying to make conversation there. I'm pointing out the restaurants and the towns, and they're monosyllabic. Yeah. And we're about 2 minutes from the gate to our community, and Lucas has not said a word, nor has his friend Kevin. And we're about to go through the gate, and I hear this voice in the back seat. It's Lucas at 16. And he says very measuredly, "This has been the greatest day of my whole life." That's all he said. And my wife and I, we got hysterical. You know, it was so memorable that I put it in a book. Yeah. My wife had the ability to say funny things. She was a very funny person, but never told jokes or anything. But she had a way of saying 4 or 5 words that would put everybody screaming with laughter. This one time, my daughter was 16 and Robbie was 2 years old, 18. We were in a living room trying to plan what to do for Annie's 16th birthday, what she wanted for her birthday, what kind of a party she wanted, and what gift we can give her. And Robbie says, "Why don't you get what all your friends got? A nose job." And I said, "Hey, Robbie, wait a minute. Her mother has a bigger nose than Annie. Look at the handsome guy she got." And Estelle said, "Yes, it's not the size of your nose that counts. It's what's in it." And just as you're laughing now, I'm doing one of the 4 pictures I did with Steve Martin. And one day I tell him this story, and just like you, he didn't laugh as loud, but he smiled very loud. And about 5 years later, he calls us, me and Estelle. He said, "Hey, you think Estelle would mind if I used that line in a movie?" And Estelle said, "I'd be honored." And she was honored. When we went to see the premiere, to see Steve Martin as Cyrano de Bergerac, Rostand in Cyrano, saying, "It's not the size of your nose that counts, it's what's in it." So that's an Estellism. Now, I have here one called, "Can a Jewish kid be an Irish tenor and someday meet Judy Garland?" I was interviewed in a dressing room, and we discovered that we were the same age. I really had a crush on her, and we found we were exactly the same age. And I told her that I was smitten by a girl who sang Balboa in the short subject Pigskin Parade. And when I saw her as Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, my feelings for her deepened. We then discussed how old we were, and we discovered we were both 37 years old at that time. And she said to me, and I'm quoting exactly, she said, "37 is a shitty age, don't you think?" And I confessed that I had not really thought about it, but I asked her why she thought it was shitty. "Because it is," Judy insisted. "Being 38 would be okay. It's a nice round number. It's just 2 years from 40. And that's like they say, life begins at 40. I'm all for that," she laughed. 40 is fine, but 37 is nowhere. I reminded her of the song, and I did. "I'm just an in-between" that she sang to a photo of Clark Gable when professing her unrequited love for her. "That's it," she laughed. "At 37, I'm once again just an in-between." I remember that so well. Then she had a segment called Celebrity Segment, and I was on that show. And I said to her, "I don't belong here, Judy." She's, "Why not?" I said, "Because I'm not a celebrity. I'm not really a celebrity." And she says, "You are." And I said, "No." And I started to prove it to her. And here's how I proved it. I told Judy of a cab driver who did not recognize me, but boasted about all the celebrities who had in the back seat of his cab. Absolutely true. I told her about this. Among them, guy said Eleanor Roosevelt, Jack Carter, Winston Churchill, Buddy Hackett, and Sonny Sparks. Sonny Sparks was a minor celebrity, but obviously more well-known to the driver than I was. And that really got me when he said he knew Sonny Sparks. And so the gravelly-voiced cab driver speaking New Yorkese had asked what I did for a living. And when I said I was an actor, he asked me if I might have seen something he had seen me in. And when I said I was on the Sid Caesar show, he asked, what do you do on it? I said, have you ever seen the show? Never miss it. I love it. He said, what do you do on it? I said, well, you know the sketches with the phony German professor? The German professor cracks me up, he said, checking the rearview mirror. That ain't you. No, Sid Caesar plays the professor. I play the guy in the trench coat who interviews him. Don't ring no bell. True story. He said, that Caesar's great. What else do you do? You ever see the takeoffs we do on foreign movies? Yeah, I love them. That Caesar guy's a riot, the way he talks in them phony foreign languages. Well, I'm the guy who sits talking to him when he talks in those phony languages. You're telling me you can speak them phony languages? Maybe not as well as Sid does, but well enough. Which ones you do? All of them. English, French, German. Oh, yeah? Do French. He ordered me to do it. For the rest of the ride, there was no prospect that the driver was ever going to hire me for a job. I auditioned all the phony accent skills for him. When we reached our destination, he turned and shouted, son of a gun, this is true. Son of a gun, I know who you are. Oh. You're that Art Carney. True story. It's a true story. And when I told him I was not Art Carney worked on Jackie Gleason. I was Carl Reiner. I worked with Sid Caesar. He nodded and said, oh, yeah. I hoped I'd convinced him that I was me and let him know that there were no hard feelings. I gave him a huge tip. I remember that, too. He was very appreciative of my largesse, and as I left the cab, he saluted me with the bills in his hand and mumbled, thanks, I really appreciate this. You do crack me up, Mr. Carney. I considered that incident a learning experience for both the cab driver and for me. Once again, I learned that I was not a true celebrity, and the driver learned that Art Carney was a generous tipper. Okay. Do we have time for more? Yes! Okay. Within the last 13 days, when I wrote this, I've been honored to within an inch of my life. These lovely floggings were inflicted in 2 separate events in 2 separate locations. The first at the Hollywood Egyptian Theater and sponsored by an American Cinematheque. The second, the auditorium of the American Academy of Television Arts and Sciences and sponsored by the Television Academy. At these events, I saw faces from the distant past, the present, and gratefully I saw no scythe-toting, black-hooded faces from my future. All the faces were, I might as well read this, I liked it. All the faces were smiling as they said nice things to my face and also into microphones, so everyone could hear how they thought I had done a great thing by creating the Dick Van Dyke Show. They did a lot of that. If I were a blusher, I could have easily unseated the world title holder of the MFWRTAB award. My face was redder than a beet. A stream of performers, writers, and directors whom I held in great affection found their way on stage and onto the couch in which I had been placed. I will not try to remember or set down what was said about me or to me or what I responded, but I will say that there was little that did not get positive response, often in the arms of raucous laughter or honest chuckles. I considered listening to names and faces I remembered looking at me and embarrassing me, but I fear embarrassing myself by the omission of someone who deserved not to be omissed. I like that word. See, I'm glad I'm reading it because I forgot I made up a word. Therefore, I will not mention Bill Persky and Gary Marshall, who with their recently departed partners Sam Denoff and Jerry Belson had written memorable episodes on The Van Dyke Show, nor will I mention Lily Tomlin, who had the opportunity to direct an All of Me, who sat next to me on the couch and described how much he loved hearing my wife singing superb jazz albums and watching her perform at the Gardenia Supper Club, nor will I mention how much trouble the comedian Gary Shandling went to making a tape telling me he was too sick to attend my event and then showing up to play the tape. Oh, I'm glad I'm reading because this is a great line. Or what a tremendous laugh he got by telling me how uncomfortable it was for him to be sitting next to an old Jew on a couch and not paying him $300 for the session. Nor will I mention Steve Martin's difficult decision about not attending the Academy event for me and the recorded message he sent to explain his dilemma. It was apparent as we watched the tape how very tortured he was about having to miss my big night. It was a genuinely heartsick Steve asking that we understand his valid reason for not showing up. He explained sadly that our event was scheduled to be held at the exact time he would be eating his dinner at the restaurant next door. That to me, I really almost fell out of my chair because he wasn't eating it with somebody, he was just eating it alone. And he was right next door. Now that to me was brilliantly creative. For fear of my self-aggrandizing, I will steer clear of mentioning any of the questions put to me by doting members of the audience, which I must say answered honestly, and to so many noisy reactions, I truly feel that the audience members who were screaming with laughter might do physical harm to their internal organs. There was such screaming with laughter. One gentleman caught me completely off guard, whose identity I have no intention of divulging, was the last guest to walk on stage and sit down next to me. He was an extraordinarily handsome actor, a selfless humanitarian, and someone I've worked with on films Oceans 11, 12, and 13. If you're guessing Brad Pitt, Matt Damon, Don Cheadle, you would be way off base. I do not mean to be a tease, but his initials are JC. Some of you may have concluded that Glenn Close is the name I'm keeping from you. And to those of you who have guessed George Clooney, all I can say is you may be right. As I said, I had no intention of divulging JC's true identity or how magnificently he performed his Oscar-worthy performance in The Descendants. The last unnamed guest and some very complimentary things about me, but I interrupted him to gush about his dedication to his making the world a better place for everyone. By the way, I really feel this. JC and his dad, Nick Clooney's humanitarian efforts to ameliorate the suffering in Somalia and the salvation in Darfur were beyond what anyone would expect a private citizen even attempt. One thing I would like to share with you is something Billy Persky reminded me that I did a long, long time ago, something I'd completely forgotten. This I really didn't remember. During the early days of the Dick Van Dyke Show, a young network executive assistant visited our production office. He had come to offer suggestions that he felt would help our then successful show become even more successful and funnier. The hotshot breezed in, plopped himself down on an easy chair, and put his feet up on our coffee table. Present and exchanging quizzical glances were staff members Gary Marshall, Jerry Belson, Bill Persky, and Sam Dunoff. With his ultra-shiny shoes resting atop my coffee table, the young lion took a slip of paper and proceeded to read aloud some of the funny ideas he had jotted down. None of us could believe what we were hearing. Our face flushed. Our fresh-faced execs did not have a clue as to what was funny or what audiences might find funny. Since it was my office and on my coffee table he rested his feet, I concluded it was my duty to act. So immediately after he told another lame joke and asked, "Now, don't you think that's funny?" "You want to know what I think is funny?" I said, then walked to him, pulled off one of his shoes, and threw it out an open window. That is what I think is funny. And then I turned and left my office. It's not long ago that after I left my office that someone at the network asked Mr. Hotshot to leave his office. At one point in that evening at the Television Academy, a thought flickered through my mind. Eventually, it was a revelation. My family, friends, close acquaintances, and co-workers had handed me a rare gift. They had given me the privilege to not only attend, but actually hear what will likely be said at my memorial service. If the speakers wax more eloquently when they look at me sitting on a couch, how much more laudatory, forthcoming, and emotional will be when they see me lying in an urn. Not much more, I'll bet. The end. I have told many people about the final minutes of my beloved wife's last hour of her last day, and I would like now to tell it again. Estelle had been bedridden for almost a year, and except for her ability to walk, was in complete control of her mental faculties. We often invited our good friends Sheila and Ron Clark, Terry and Sandra Marsh, and our oldest and dearest friend Mel Brooks to dine with us in a beautiful, airy, 5-windowed bedroom. Our last day at the age of 94, our family, which included Robbie, Annie, Lucas, Georgie, and me, were at her side, helping her to say goodbye. Earlier that week, she had individual conversations with each of our children and discussed with them their feeling that she had not done as good a job of mothering them as she would have liked. One by one, they shot down her arguments and convinced her that she was nothing less than an exceptional and inspiring mother whom they loved and appreciated. As the hours passed, her breathing became more and more shallow, but she seemed to be in no pain. She was still responding to our conversation, but spoke less and less. The hospice workers were in the room and ready to help if needed. She had difficulty keeping her eyes open, but seemed to be aware of what was being said to her, but had stopped speaking or trying to speak. Her breathing was now very shallow, and a quiet moan suggested that she was experiencing a low level of pain. To alleviate this, the hospice nurse suggested I place a drop of prescribed anti-pain medication under her lip. Her nephew George told her how much he loved her and that if she wanted to go, she should feel free to do so. I had thought of playing a song from one of her CDs. I chose Adult Songs for Children, the last recording she did at 90. I turned up the volume and hoped that she could hear herself singing, A, you're adorable, B, you're so beautiful, C, you're a bundle full of charms. There were no visible reaction from her, and we had no idea that she heard herself singing. The small intermittent breaths she took were almost imperceptible. I sat beside her and held her hand as we listened to her sing. One of her hospice nurses quietly remarked, "What a lovely, sweet voice she has." Lucas heard the comment, and with his face 3 inches from his mother's, he said slowly and distinctly, "Ma, the nurse said you have a lovely, sweet voice." We would not have known that Estelle heard what Luke said had she not, just before expiring, mouthed the words, "Thank you." She actually said, and then expired. We didn't hear it. Yeah, I mean, it's worth sharing because I don't think anybody went with a happier with her whole family around her. Now I wrote something that I commend to you. It's there is no end for the living. That's called The End. And then I said, there is no end for the living. I titled the preceding chapter The End, and then I thought that was not really the end for those of us who are still alive, like me. If it were the end, I would not be thinking about how much I miss my wife and how much she is still with me during the day and at night before I fall asleep and in my dreams. Last night I dreamt of her. I dreamt I have to call her. I didn't call her for a day or so, and I said, well, I got to call her. Last night, and in my writing. This thought came to me while I was driving to our neighborhood Whole Foods to buy Chilean sea bass for my children. While in my car, my wife is always beside me. That is her sweet voices. It floats out of the car's multiple speakers, and during the ride, I'm able to hear a few of her 137 songs she recorded. I remember the combination of excitement and anxiety she felt when we drove to Wilder Brothers' studio to record some of the songs. In particular, I recall a problem we encountered when she recorded one of my favorites, When the Red, Red Robin Comes Bob-Bob-Bobbing Along. The problem presented itself when she sang the line, I'm walking through fields of flowers. Having been born and raised in the Bronx, Estelle pronounced the word walking as walking, and as any bona fide New Yorker would. We redid the track, and she corrected all of her mispronunciations but one. I'm happy to say I'm still able to hear her sing the lyrics, I'm walking through fields of flowers. And I often replay that section just to hear her talk, the Bronx way of talking. Nothing tickles me more than listening to Estelle strum and sing on Ukulele Mama 1 or Ukulele Mama 2. I challenge you not to melt when you hear her sing the old standards, Blue Skies, It Had to Be You, Goody Goody, Ain't She Sweet, or Love a Man, which only Billie Holiday sang an iota better. I believe that her last album has the power to soften the hardness of hearts. To people who have friends or relatives whose hard hearts they have unsuccessfully tried to soften, I recommend you sit down and have them listen to Estelle Reiner singing grown-up songs for kids. I say again, there is no end for the living if you can enjoy memories of a life partner who physically is not there but spiritually is everywhere. There's no end for the living if you awaken each morning and think seriously about what to eat for breakfast. Here now are some 20 random entries in what I imagine will be a growing list. There is no end for the living if I can look forward to a morning shower, a visit with my children, Robbie, Annie, and Lucas, seeing grandchildren Jake, Nick, Romy, Livy, and Rose, spending time with my daughters-in-law Michelle and Maud and their husbands, nightly visits from Mel Brooks, reading Annie Reiner's psychoanalytic books. I was reading one of them last night. They're difficult, so you read them slowly. Yeah. Listening to Annie Reiner sing, viewing Lucas's oil paintings and etchings and hugging him, attending a screening of a new Rob Reiner film, which I just the other day called The Beauty of Belle Isle with Morgan Freeman and Virginia Marsden. One of the most, so beautiful a picture, and nobody may go see it. No. He just previewed it in Texas, and Texans were standing up. He said it's so beautiful. It's coming out in a couple months. Watching Rob's The Spinal Tap, The Mighty Wind, The Princess Bride, and A Few Good Men. Right-wing senators and congressmen losing their seats. I like seeing that. Yeah. Lunching at Bier Beisel, an Austrian restaurant that features Weisswurst. A sushi lunch with sushi-loving friends. A daily brisk walk with Georgia Shapiro. Political programs hosted by someone who shares my views. Hearing a great new joke, laughing at it, then passing it along. Hearing Livia play her harp or violin. Hearing Rose play her cello and sing Philippine, Peruvian, and Indian songs. She sings absolutely beautifully. Hearing Estelle Reiner sing I've Grown Accustomed to Her Face, that's on one of the albums. Viewing new films at the Academy of Motion Picture Arts Theater. Nightly visits from Melvin Kaminsky. Melvin doesn't know he's in there twice. And finally, there is no end for the living if I can look forward to this book entertaining the dozens of loyal readers I have worldwide. And then I say, start your list. Start your list. Yes. Thank you. Your applause will reverberate all the way home. I really do appreciate it.